Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Ooh, I banged my cigar into my mic. Always trying new things. Always ends up badly. The first time, at least. All right. So a lot of you know, if you're familiar with the show, that there's several seasons of the show, and you'll know that the first, 40 episodes or so, I was still learning about the mic and all this other stuff, and I had just come off of a radio show with a buddy of mine, and so he gave me some advice about how to talk into it, and I got really too close to the mic. So there are some episodes with, I think, some pretty critical content, which will feed into other videos because it's all everything's a thread. So where I think these things need to be repaired, because there's nothing I can do to repair the old videos, I did do what's called remastering them. My remastering was balancing the audio that was either bad or good, and then cutting out all the pauses, shrinking the videos, sometimes even 15 minutes. And so helped you get through that. This is huge for me because here's the deal with writing movies. Now, my previous episode is called Screenplay Writing, and it's okay, but this one's going to be called How to Write a Movie because it's a little friendlier title, and there's all kinds of things that have to do with putting together a film. Now, the issue is this. You might be going, oh, dude, come on, really? When you want to learn how to write a film, you do have a lot of books out there, and they have varying levels of advice that really work. Now, you're your own person. You will poach. And no matter what, you're going to poach what works for you and leave behind what doesn't work for you. That's just the name of the game. But there are tons of things that you will not be told by some people because they don't want to give up their recipe of how it works. Then you have people like my teacher, Robert McKee, who wrote the best book in the world on this, which is called Story. And if you get the book on tape, he reads it to you. He's got a whole website called Storylog, and he does tons of extra videos, all phenomenal, all amazing. But you got to pay for that, and you got to pay for the other thing. Plus, he's teaching you the nitty-gritty, which I'm going to share, part of what he does here, but nothing I could ever attempt to do, save sitting here with the book and reading it to you, will ever give you what Robert McKee can give you. I've been to his class 3 times. I designed some software that I'm still debating on whether or not to program at this point, based on his books that has artificial intelligence, does some pretty cool stuff. However, so I know his book really, really well is what I'm trying to say. He's teaching you emotions and what you're responsible for, and we're going to get into some of that stuff. I'm going to teach you some mechanisms, some expectations, both your expectations of you writing something and how long it takes to design and write things, the process that I personally use to get this thing done. And there's tools that I will bring out of the toolbox for one type of movie, and a different type of movie, I don't need it. Some movies will write themselves. Some movies are going to need a lot of work. It's one thing to write original franchise. It's another thing to sequel a franchise. It's another thing to sequel a sequel. You are responsible to an audience. You are supposed to be generating money with what you're doing. So you got to play that game. You can ignore it, the demographic that you're supposed to be selling to. The problem is you'll never get through selling the product, save a miracle or some weird coincidence, without knowing how to play that game. So my advice on that, which we're going to get into, is that you need to be so clever in your writing that you're addressing it, it's flexible, and you don't end up getting cynical like a lot of writers who either write bad content, get turned down, and then blame Hollywood, or they wrote great content, but they wrote it without these tricks, such that they can be eaten alive by people that want to put their stink on your script. They don't really care if your script ever gets made, especially if it's going to be made. They'll get in there and mess your script up. They're not trying to mess it up. They just don't know how to write. But what they want to do is sit in the theater with their family members and friends and say, that line was mine. And so you get those kind of people as well. I'll touch briefly, because I've got other episodes that go in deeper, but I'll touch briefly on sort of some paths you can use to get your script read by someone. But that is the moving target of all moving targets, which comes with several different layers. So what I try to do is write in a particular way that is so generic that I could write a Western, but the only thing that's selling in Hollywood are space movies. And so they could see the Western and go, you know what, all we got to do is put this in space, some spaceships, take those pistols, make them laser guns, or the opposite direction. I've written a sci-fi franchise, and they could knock it down to some Tombstone type script, right? Not historically overlaying something else, but generally in that genre. The reason why I think this is good for public content is that a screenplay and a book and a story, one or all of which can benefit from what I'm about to say because it is all generic storytelling, is that we all have stories in us. You're a human being, so you can listen to the universe. The universe will give you things. You have your own life. You could tell your life story as a different person. You could tell your life story as a knight in a kingdom. You could be Joan of Arc. You could be somebody else. But the trials and tribulations and things you went through that make your life interesting are the things that you're going to cannibalize for the rest of your life when you write stories. Plus, we tell stories. We almost need to tell stories. Even though maybe someone is pitted in telling, stuff they saw on the internet, stuff they saw on some news media site, they're not realizing they're telling a story because a lot of it's not true. So why not walk away from all that negativity and create something super positive and interesting, even if you're writing a horror movie or some really tear-jerking drama? If you do choose to purchase Robert McKee's story, here's the one little trick I'm going to tell you before we get into anything. Get yourself a little nugget of an idea. Some film that you think might be interesting to you. A genre, meaning, is it space? Is it sci-fi, science fiction? Is it whatever it is? Is it a Western? Is it a rom-com? Romantic comedy? Then keep that little thing in your head and pretend as you're listening to Robert McKee read his own book, and he's got a great voice, let me tell you. Especially if you get a chance to go to his class. Go before he dies, okay? Hopefully you're going to live a nice long life, but man, if you can get him in person, there's nothing like it. Pretend like he's talking to you about your script. Every suggestion he makes, just pretend he knows your idea and he's trying to help you out. So how do you get started in this whole thing? Well, before you need to go buy any books or anything, I'm going to save you a lot of money and a lot of time. If you do go buy something, you're going to be able to open up the book, read through its index or its table of contents, and you're going to be able to find out whether or not it has what you need. There's a lot of folks that have written books that have never sold a film. Doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about. I'm yet to sell a film. But I've been blessed to hang out with the people who do and the people who have. People have made legendary movies, okay? So that's good. And believe me, I've interviewed them like crazy. But I've also just done things like listen to the commentary of a film, or I've listened to George Lucas talk about how he put together the Star Wars franchise and all the stuff he ever puts together. Where it made sense to me, I took his technique. But what is a screenplay? What is it? What's inside the story of a screenplay? Well, the way it usually starts in almost every single scenario, unless you're a pro writer, is my experience, is you come up with a premise. Because there's going to be two things we're going to write. There's a premise and there's a story. The premise is sort of the technical thing that occurs that's interesting about your movie. The story is, why would I care about your premise? The individual characters that are going to participate in this premise need to have a background. Whether or not you want to start off the script with, you don't know anything about this character, that in itself is a background. Well, what do you know about this guy? You sit down next to your favorite person and you haven't caught the credits just finished rolling. You're like, what's this about? And that person goes, I have no idea. What do you mean? Well, this guy just walked onto the screen. They're not telling us anything about him. Well, that's his background. You don't know anything about him. That's the mystery, perhaps, of that particular story. Now, the premise that I usually work with is Terminator, the original Terminator, because it's super easy to understand and it's fairly engaging. What is the premise? Well, At some point in the future, Skynet turns on. The robots end up gaining so much artificial intelligence that they're able to manufacture themselves, repair themselves. They have command of the earth, and they have command of the sky, and most likely the water, even though we haven't had an episode really exhibition that. But one guy in the future named John Connor wipes them out in the future, or at least causes a tremendous problem in the future. And somehow these artificial intelligence AIs figure out how to time travel. They build a human being looking android that has actually got a flesh suit on the outside, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger. They send him to the past, 1985, the time we saw the movie, and he tries to kill Sarah Connor, the mother of John Connor. And she fights for her life. And of course, the franchise has gone on after that. So what's the premise? The premise is a robot from the future comes to the past to try and kill a mother who will eventually bear the child that will kill the robots in the future. Perfect, unbelievably clear, amazing story. I mean, in terms of the premise, right? But now we have to care. We have to care about Sarah Connor's life. What if Sarah Connor was just a jerk and had no empathy towards humanity, and the only thing that you wrote about her was that she got her, brushed her teeth, went to work, came home, and that when he opens the door, "Are you Sarah Connor?" and she goes, "Yes," he just goes, boom, and she's dead. Or she runs away, We got to break this thing down. You are responsible for a maximum during reading time of 120 minutes. The way that they work this out is that it's a page a minute. Doesn't always really work out that way, but it averages that way. Truth be told, 90 to 95 pages is not a sin in Hollywood because, hey man, if they can get the whole thing down and it's 25 pages shorter than a 120 script, but they can see it and they're like, I got it, man. I don't need to read another 25 pages. I totally understand. And believe it or not, when you hand a script to a professional, whether it be a director, especially directors, they don't read it unless you pass the test where they tab in, they read the first couple lines, see if it interests them. Maybe they get to page 3 tops, then they flip to page 30 around in that area and they're reading. Then usually they'll just go right to the ending and they'll just read the last few pages. Those pages all have to be gold, man. The way that they're written have to be gold. And we'll get into what gold means as we move on. But what's the responsibility of Terminator? McKee uses like older movies because he's at least 15, 20 years older than me. Well, we've got to set up the whole thing. So we're going to have to show the future, maybe even confuse you about what the future is. Then we have to show this robot coming backwards, right? Still all premise, all kind of what they call exhibition, showing you the story that's coming. Then we have two main characters. Your protagonist, which is the good guy, and your antagonist, who's the bad guy. If at the end of your movie, your good guy does not accomplish their goal, it's a tragedy. If they accomplish their goal, classically it's called a comedy. Isn't that funny? So if anybody throws those two pieces of terminology with the masks, that's what your answer is. But we have to establish how formidable, how threatening this robot is, such that when he gets to her, we're scared for her life. At the same time, we've got to establish her as a decent, hardworking human being. And the more that we can lump onto that, she is a working woman. She doesn't deserve to die. It's fantastic. But now they threw in a third character to get this ball rolling. Because if the robot simply showed up to Sarah Connor's house, she wouldn't have a chance in hell at first to defend herself. Now, as she gets beefier for Terminator 2, we know that she does defend herself, but she's not all muscular just yet. Very attractive, but she's not muscular just yet. So what do they do in the script? They send a dude back. A human being goes back around the same time as the robot. And he's trying to find Sarah Connor first. Ah, boy, that introduces all kinds of wonderful formulas for suspense. Now there's a clock ticking. We're seeing the robot. He comes in naked. He's got to grab some clothing. He doesn't know how to communicate with humans that well. He's got all this digital eyeball, heads-up display stuff going. And there's all kinds of, plot mechanisms they've put with that guy when he gets injured and heals himself, has to put on sunglasses because he's got a bum eye because he got messed up. Now, you can't hurt this guy with most of the things that exist in this world. But here's the thing. Here comes a guy from the future to this woman. Again, we've established her because there's a bunch of scenes showing who she is. And this guy shows up, and then what's the problem there? Well, just put yourself in her shoes because you're the writer, and you'll be the audience as well. She's not going to believe him. Of course not. More tension, more goal setting that has to take place. This dude has to gain credibility with her. He knows that she's not going to believe him. But he knows the second this robot shows up, she's going to start believing really fast, but it could lead to her death. So it's this tumultuous situation. So that's the difference between premise and story. You have to make everyone care about your story, about your characters. Seems like with Terminator, when you look at a masterpiece like that, a masterpiece that is such a simple premise, the story almost writes itself. It doesn't, but it feels like it does. It definitely would write itself faster than a super complicated premise where you've got, two family reunions happening at the same time. It's the Romeos and the Capulets just happen to be hanging out at the same park, and there's all kinds of interpersonal relationship issues. Two people are in love, bunch of people hate each other. What's the backstory? You got the young kids that hate each other because their parents told the young kids that we hate those other people. What made the old people pissed off? That's, level 8 to level 9 writing. Just in the premise of trying to hook up all the little wires. So do yourself a favor. Keep things simple when you get started. So how do we break this stuff down? Well, if you go read a bunch of books, almost every single book out there, and hopefully this is changing. My last round of buying books was probably about 10 years ago because I just finally, after going to McKee's class 3 times and working with my writing mentor, who's a very accomplished person, you take what's good about it and you leave everything else behind. But they'll always talk about a 3-act play. If a 3-act system works for you, go for it. This entire video and all my videos work on the 4-act system. Why? Because it's a hell of a lot easier for me personally to memorize things in 4 chunks. What is the traditional 3-act play? The 3-act play system, screenplay system, is 30 minutes for your first act, 60 minutes for your second act, and any number of pages for your third act, but they usually say 30 for your third act. Now, again, my experience is you can use 5 pages for your third act, or you can take all 30. As long as it concludes, when Hollywood picks it up, they'll put other people on your script, or maybe if you're lucky, they'll hire you to rewrite it, and you'll get probably another 60 to 80 pages in the script. Plus, you have to understand, directors have techniques of stretching scenes to give more emotional absorption, right? So you might have a guy walks across the field, and that's all you wrote, 1 line on 1 page. But the director goes, this is a very important moment when there's some introspection going on with the character. So we're going to extend that to 3 different shots, and it's going to take maybe a minute or 2 to finish that out. This is a big thing that they used to do in the 60s and before, and sadly we've lost sort of those slower establishing shots because they are very, very powerful. I have seen them attempted more recently. Some do a really great job, some don't. But at least we're experimenting again, which is good. The problem I find with the second act being 60 pages is that's a lot of pages for your brain to keep in play. Now, if your premise is super duper strong and the script is writing itself, those 60 minutes won't be as painful. But there's anatomy to all of these acts. They're not just, hey, just write 30 pages. It's just write 30 pages. It's not like that. So let's say you got your premise and you got your story. So you think, oh my God, I just got to start cutting scenes. Well, the last thing you're going to double click in your life is going to be your screenwriting software. You won't be ready for that for quite a while. The only people I know that jump into screenwriting software right away are super duper pros who have been there a million times. They're probably writing something episodical such that they just look in the bag of tricks. What would Data say on Star Trek? What would Darth Vader say in Star Wars? Whatever. And they're going with a giant library of possibilities constantly, and they're just working it out. But I haven't met anyone personally who's claimed to start right inside screenwriting software and create anything that they're proud to show anybody else. But there's something that McKee calls, and what you need to understand is McKee is known for really inventing the nomenclature, the terminology that we use in Hollywood, period. Some of it he inherited from other folks, and some of them he invented himself. But you need to know that McKee has seen more classic, wonderful, amazing movies, both European and American, than probably anyone else on the planet. At least with his intellectual capacity to pass the art on to others. So he has created something called the controlling idea. The controlling idea is usually something that is fairly difficult for new folks to conceive of in the proper way. And, he may even disagree with my interpretation. A controlling idea is a very simple statement that is the essence of your entire script. I'll give you a real basic one, which you should never write in your controlling idea to pass out professionally. But if you said, good always triumphs over evil, that's a controlling idea. Now that would mean that as you're writing your script, you are establishing very clearly what is good and what is bad. You would also need to set up multiple tests of good versus evil and either lose a few times until you get something, your boon, something that's your lightsaber, you get Jedi training or whatever. And at the end of this sequence of events, you win big at the end. And there you go. Good always triumphs over evil. And you might just write in there, just not when you think it will, right? Or something like that, right? But you might have a controlling idea that talks about trust. It might talk about sacrifice. It might be the sacrifice of humans. It might be the sacrifice of gods, but told with humans, If you were to tell the story of Christ, well, it would sort of beckon the controlling idea that gods have to make sacrifices too. And that's what your story would totally equal at the very end of the telling. So let's get into what the acts are made out of, what their goals are. Because there's another teacher out there named Sid Field. He would be the only one that I could, without any worry, suggest that you at least get his beginner's book, if not his advanced book. I probably own about 3 of his books. He has an interesting chart that kind of breaks down a 3-act system. He's an old school guy. But if you just think about his chart, which I'll flash on the screen here, he helps your mind see dividers. So you have a timeline that goes across the screen. And your first 30 pages is a sector all to itself. And then the next sector, which I call Act 2, is from the end of Act 1 to my end of Act 2, which is his center of Act 2. And then what I do is end of Act 2 to end of Act 3 prepares you for the final act, which is Act 4, to resolve everything that you've built up. It's where you can release some twists and turns and false endings and that kind of thing. But those are cliche statements at this point. You must do these things very carefully. Now, most of you have seen enough cinema now because it's on demand on TV. You're getting more cinematic content than most of the writers that you admired back in the day, no matter how far back you go, especially the further back you go. Going to the movies was an event. You dressed up, you went down to the theater, you did it. Some folks, like my father, would just go 3 or 4 times a week. He raised me in film so deeply that My references for film goes way, way back further than anyone my age in most cases. But your first act, your first 30 pages, which it really does have to be pretty strategic. No matter how short you make your script, your 30 pages is your setup. Your setup is, what the hell am I sitting down and watching, and why am I watching it? There needs to be something utterly gripping in your first act at some point. Now, if you go to McKee's class, he'll tell you that you can fully set up your script in as little as like 3 pages. I think he's being fair with that statement, but I think that he's also misleading a lot of new writers. I don't think new writers can actually pull that off successfully if you're brand new. I just haven't seen it done. If you want to do that, then you should be writing maybe a 22-minute Twilight Zone or something, and then you have 5 minutes to set up, and then you're good. Maybe experiment with shorter scripts if that appeals to you. I think that people are giving you enough money to walk into the movie theater to deserve a nice, beautiful setup. Now let's go through some setups here. Well, Terminator 1. That event has to take place. They show you the future. They show you the present. They show you the robot coming back. They show you the guy coming back. We're not sure what the hell's going on. When he gets to her, he starts describing what the hell's going on, that she must believe him and that he's protecting her against a robot she's never seen, who looks human and quite handsome, right? Here's the guy, though. We've seen him walk into a bar. Give me your clothes, right? He does all kinds of crazy stuff trying to find her. I'll be back. He runs a car directly into the police station trying to find out where this chick lives. Once she sees Arnold Schwarzenegger, he tries to kill her. And the dude, Connor's dad, defends her from that situation. All is validated in her mind. And we're off to the races. We're ready to find out what this story's about. In a way, your goal is to create an entertaining experience. Just think about it like that. And quite frankly, there's just a few things you need to kind of have in your soul to pull this off. And out of the many, many people who said, what do you do for a living? I say I screenwrite. Oh, I got a great idea for a film. I literally had a guy who just performed on stage in San Diego, does this crazy, wild, amazing, creative thing, painted himself head to toe in makeup, and he comes out, he's like, I got a great idea for a film. I'm like, okay, well, you're a pretty creative guy, so lay it on me, man. He tells me Terminator, start to finish. And I'm looking at this guy, I'm waiting for the twist. I'm waiting for something to be different. I said, well, that's Terminator. And his only line in return to me is, yeah, well, mine will be better. Okay, so some people can be extremely talented at one thing and be brain dead on another thing. Your requirement as a writer is not to shamelessly rip off what everyone else has done. If you're going to do that, if you're going to copy another film because you think it needs to be updated or something, you absolutely have to change it from the original film. Hollywood smells that stuff a mile away, and they will burn your script in 2 seconds and write your name in a little black book, and you'll have an exceptionally hard time getting anything done through their apparatus. You go get your own movie made and you pay for it yourself because you're a multi-millionaire. Good luck getting it distributed outside of Netflix and Hulu. You have to know the difference between stuff that's been done a million times and stuff that's never been done before. My advice is what I follow myself, which is watch only the most classic films you can get your hands on. If you watch absolutely everything that's out there, your mind will get muddy and you won't know whether or not you're taking it from classic films that the entire world knows, right? So, you could be watching Netflix only, for instance. I don't mean to pick on Netflix, but you watch a great series on Netflix, you start writing a copy of that thing, you're making minor changes here and they're thinking you've struck gold. Later, you find out it was actually Blade Runner. Why not watch Blade Runner? Save yourself the pain of Netflix. Learn the classics. Learn all the turns, the twists, the mechanisms in the screen, which we'll get to, and write something super duper original. My goal is always to write something completely out of this world or something extremely caricature of this world, such that it feels fresh and new and silly. If I'm writing this world, it's either very deep, emotional, or it's super duper funny, kind of Raising Arizona style, but not ripping off that film. If I write science fiction, it has got to have an amazing premise that the whole world could understand once explained or once discovered in the script. If I write horror, I write The Shining kind of stuff. I don't write, Chucky and Friday the 13th stuff. I mean, those movies make money. They have their time and place. If that's you, people make a ton of money writing that kind of stuff. But they're very formulaic. They demand that you just copy yourself. What's a sequel? Same movie, change the names, change the locations, make up some more gory crap to do. And hey, if that tickles your fancy, if you actually feel like an artist doing that sort of thing, or you just accept that that's what you're good at, do it. Make all that paper, man. So page 30, okay, in the traditional sense is where you're going to conclude, and I mean on page 30, okay? You're going to turn things such that the audience finally goes, oh my God, this is what this thing is all about. And Twilight Zones is about 5 minutes, and you figured out the mechanism, which is amazing with this script. I give you a Twilight Zone setup here. There's a script where 3 sort of bank robbers or sort of home invaders are sorting their loot in a hotel. And it's just all crap. Then they turn on the news, and the news says that, hundreds of thousands of dollars of stuff were stolen. They're looking at the costume jewelry going, oh man, they're lying to their insurance company. This is all crap. But in this bunch of crap is a little camera, little box camera from the day, back in the day. And it's got a little bit of French writing on the front, but that's about it. You can't even open the thing up. You can't get any film into the camera, but it's got a little slit like a Polaroid that if you take a picture, it comes out the front. Well, they take a picture on accident, I think. And it comes out, and it's them in the room, but it's not the event that's going on in the room. 5 minutes later, that event occurs in the room on the photograph. So that's your first setup. You think you're done with the setup. But in comes room service and has a French guy giving them their food. He looks at the camera and goes, oh, can I see that camera? And he's like, oh, well, that's weird. Why does it say that on the front? And they said, well, we don't know French. What does it say? And I think it says something like 10 per customer. And so they've been kind of taking photographs and enjoying the fact that this is like a trick camera is what the guy thinks, right? And so the dude leaves and they realize, oh my God, we got a camera that sees the future. We can go to the racetrack, take a picture of the scoreboard, and then go bet on it, and then it'll happen. But there's only 10 pictures, and they've already messed up a couple just playing around with it. There's your setup. Now, how's it going to end, right? I'll let you go watch the episode. It's on Netflix. And one of the actors from that episode was in an Alfred Hitchcock movie, too. So Terminator was the setup for Sarah to meet both the future father of her son, John Connor, and the robot, and validate everything that he's saying and get on the run to be chased. Because that sets the tension up, so the rest of the film is all exciting and wild, right? Stargate. The movie Stargate was that a weird artifact, a giant artifact, was found in the desert. They dig it out. They ship it off to a warehouse. They find out the goddamn thing is a Stargate. They electrify it. They create the portal where you put your finger in it, and it looks like water, a water wall. And then they decide, they got their little SWAT team with Kurt Russell and everybody, and they walk through the portal. For me, one of the best setups ever in terms of emotional payoff. One last one before we move on. Star Wars. What's the deal with Star Wars? Well, we see this amazing opening shot with 2 spaceships shooting on each other. The Corvette gets sucked up into the Star Destroyer. Princess Leia's on there. You see her give a little thing to R2-D2. He knows what to do. He's got to get off this ship through an escape pod and get that information to the rebellion to knock out eventually the Death Star. I don't think that's a surprise for anybody. But instead, they crash in the desert in Tatooine. They get picked up by the Jawas. We get introduced to Luke Skywalker and all his adolescent problems. And Mark Hamill was told to be whiny in the movie. That's on purpose, right? Setting up his immaturity, setting up his desires just to be some, rugrat here on Tatooine. But he kind of talks about getting into the learning how to fly spaceships and getting into the rebel forces. And of course, his uncle's like, no way, man. But what do? They end up buying the robots. And then during a cleanup process, poof, there goes Princess Leia. He falls in love with this girl, who's his sister. And then he ends up waking up the next day. R2-D2 is run off into the desert because, his little rollers work really great in the sand. He goes out to look for R2-D2, finds Obi-Wan Kenobi, who scares off the sand people, right? Brings him into his cool 1970s crib. And that's when R2-D2 plays the full message back, telling Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope, man. And now, Obi-Wan tells Luke that, man, your father was one of the best Jedis to ever exist, and he was my pupil. But he was killed by a guy named Darth Vader. And he goes, well, we got to go rescue her. And then they go to the cantina. And we're off to the races. Your setups need to be mega compelling. You should know within your premise, before you get to the character breakdowns and building them all up, whether or not this thing is going to be interesting at all. If you don't have the turns and the twists that you feel like you need, because we're going to talk about turns here, because the end of Act 1 is a turn, and we're going to have many turns along the way. Once you know what one turn is, you can keep turning bigger and bigger and bigger, because that's your responsibility. But a turn is really simple. Luke Skywalker had one life. He didn't know anything about this impending doom called the Death Star. Didn't know who his father was. Didn't know really who Obi-Wan was. He knew that guy existed out there. But what happened? He tries to go back to his parents, who are his aunt and uncle. They see the Jawas got attacked and all blown away by Imperial forces, which is something that Obi-Wan deduced. And he's like, oh my God, if they found out who they sold those robots to, it was going to be a problem. So he goes back to his home. And the reason why Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru had to be toast outside, because we have to sever Luke's connection with Tatooine. He's got nothing to lose anymore. He can go anywhere in the galaxy. And that's exactly what he does. The only thing was, like, he had a strong constitution seeing those burned bodies. If you really rewatch that scene, in 77, man, that was some gruesome, accurate, body-burning prosthetics on the ground. Sarah Connor was living a normal life until the robot comes to get her. Stargate was more of a figure out what's on the other side of this gate. Everyone's life was pretty much going to plan. Kurt Russell always did weird stuff. He just didn't know he was ever going to jump to another planet at one point. But you're turning people's lives upside down. And you're doing it in a way that is masterfully interesting and aligned with your premise and aligned to hit that target called your controlling idea by the end of the film. To drive home that message with every piece of dialogue that you've ever crafted into the script. You shouldn't veer off too much. Now, comedies are different. Comedies, you're popping jokes left and right. You can have non sequitur jokes and stuff. But still, if you take Dumb and Dumber, for instance, a non sequitur joke is, you want to hear the most annoying sound ever. There's no point in that example other than to be funny. But in the end, it's about these two guys trusting each other and being buddies to the end of the film, through thick and thin. They kind of are so immature and so childish that along the way, to reinforce their childhood, their childish nature, they're backstabbing each other just like little kids do. So now, from this point forward, I will not be talking about 3-act play systems. I'm going to talk about 4-act play systems. Your next 30 minutes is usually where, if you're a first-time writer, it's where you start to feel the pressure. Because the setups are usually already in your head. Even though they might be shorter than 30 pages, you'll always find room to put in more content. And we're going to get to characters here in a second here, but I want to give you structure first. And again, you're going to go at this at different chronology based on how it's coming to you. The way I write films is, in my brain, the film is done. And I'm just sneaking into the theater, trying to watch the scenes I haven't written down yet, trying to hear the dialogue as I'm sitting there. And it's just like being a painter. If you see an amazing painting in your mind, you're like, oh, I just want to paint that or draw that or whatever. Even Sid Mead told me, you get as close as you can. No one ever gets it 100%. And that guy could do anything that, is imaginable. So don't beat yourself up too much if your writing isn't exactly what you want, because one, you're going to come back to it anyway. But anyway, there is something that Sid Fields suggests with Act 2, which is very important. Your audience, depending on your skilled writing, even though you might have a great premise set up, and they're very interested in getting into your film and seeing how it works out, there is a bit of fatigue sitting in a movie theater for 2 hours. So what he suggests is what he calls two things at the same exact time. 15 pages into this next 30 pages, he's realizing, okay, the audience has been sitting there for 45 minutes. You can't easily just keep telling a story, the same kind of story, without something extra special happening that can be turned into what's called a subplot. He calls the 15-page mark in Act 2 the pinch point. There are 2 pinch points in a Sid Fields structure, which I think are brilliant. It's what I try to write as well. The next pinch point is going to be in the next act, and it's going to be 15 pages into the next act. If you add the 2 15 minutes together, this is going to take 30 minutes to set up and 30 minutes to resolve. I think Jumanji has I don't know if it's exactly in the script the way it is, but in the second Jumanji with Kevin Hart, this is a movie about kids being yanked into a video game and then turning into The Rock, Kevin Hart, and Jack Black, and that beautiful woman who was part of, she's part of Marvel, she's part of Doctor Who. I always forget her name. She's Amy Pond in my brain, which is the fictitious character name in Doctor Who. But they land inside this world, right? That's the end of Act 1 for them. And then Kevin Hart gets, they all get to look at their stats, their strengths and their weaknesses. And one of Kevin's weaknesses was he couldn't eat bread. And it's just a weird, funny thing, right? Kevin's a brilliant guy, so he looks at that and he's looking at the screen like, what does that mean? You can't eat bread. What's bread's my enemy? What's this deal, right? It wasn't as clear as that. Something about bread. So into the script he goes, and I would think, somewhere around 30 minutes, they're starving to death, and they get inside this sort of like Casablanca kind of town, like a Morocco kind of town, and he's hungry, and someone says, oh my God, look at all this bread. And he eats bread, and then he takes a big bite of the bread. Oh, it's so delicious. And then he turns to this new person they met, and he says something like, I'm not supposed to eat bread. And then he explodes, and then he loses a life and falls from the sky again. That's like a comedy version of a subplot. But a subplot would be sort of a side story that's going on at the same time, which complements the main story. Could be developing an enemy that's going to be new. Could be someone who you thought was good is turning evil, and you let the audience know at this pinch point, 45 pages in, halfway through your Act 2, that this person is questionably loyal. Then in 30 minutes, they show their hand to the rest of the characters, and they deal with it. They disable the person, kill them, whatever. But the end of Act 2 is a big deal. It's a big deal. So again, the turn at the beginning of your script is usually pretty simple because it's just, this is why you're interested in my story. At the end of Act 2, you're responsible for turning everything upside down such that the audience goes, oh my God, I thought it was about this, but it's actually about this other thing. One of the most brilliant ones that you'll see is in Back to the Future. And I think this is the Act 2 turn, but even if it isn't, it is a good example of how things change such that we're adding a whole nother dynamic to the story. Was it Marty gets, with the doc, gets in the car, goes 88 miles an hour, goes to the past, ends up in Pasadena, goes to the doc's house. He's trying to get the credibility established. The doctor's a fairly open-minded scientist, and everything's great until he pulls out a photograph of his sister, or a photograph of his sister and his brother, and they start to disappear from the photograph. Oh my God, there's way more to this game. I have got to get my father to ask my mother out because my mother's now attracted to me. And his whole thing is to get his father, who's a complete geek, you are my density, to basically make a pass at the mother. And it's just like, how are you going to do it, man? So that's a huge turn in the center of the film. This is where McKee's teachings get extremely strategic, where you think you're dealing with things you can't solve, and this guy will teach you. Now, going on to Act 3, we're going to go back and keep visiting these things because we're going to get to the character map here in a second. Then we're going to talk about what software to use first and what software to use next. At least the techniques that I use, which is the George Lucas technique. In Act 3, which is another 30 pages, one, you got to remember your setup from Act 2, 15 minutes. That's going to resolve 15 pages into Act 3. So it's kind of already written for you. That's a nice little thing. If you've turned the script correctly, well, Marty having to get his father to fall in love with his mother, that's the whole goal. At the same time, Marty's got to get back home. So the doc's got to figure out how to get gigawatts into this flux capacitor to get him home, which is where they got the wires strung up and all this other stuff. So here he is going to the dance, trying to get his parents together. His mother thinks his name's Calvin Klein, and she's all hot for him. So he's got to set something up so that the father does something heroic in front of the mother. But Marty starts fading as well, right, in Act 4. So your goal with Act 3, and this simplifies that a little bit, okay? And I haven't heard this really said as clearly as I'm going to say it to you, but every single thing that you want to have happen in your final act, which should probably be as easy to write as your first act, because when you think up your premise, you should definitely have your setup and you should definitely have your ending all figured out. And that's what makes it interesting. Look at this setup. Look at this payoff. Boom. Now in Terminator, it was just a battle to the deaths, right? Get him in that molten lava and get him out of the game. But then false ending, right? So make a list of everything that needs to be set up. Just like a volleyball, the setup and the spike. You're spiking everything down in your fourth act. So through your second and third acts, you're keeping track of all the setups. Now, if you're writing a mystery, for instance, you're going to need to get to the point where Act 1 to the end of Act 3, you're dropping clue after clue after clue. You may let your characters find a big clue, which is part of your turn of Act 2, or you may find it more feasible and interesting to mislead them with bad clues. At the end of Act 3, your responsibility to the audience, having resolved your subplot 15 pages earlier, is to make sure that they feel what needs to occur in Act 4. But here's the trick with Act 4, and here's the trick with being a great screenwriter. I've had this described to me by my mentor, and then I'm going to describe what McKee will tell you. Think of your fourth act as a tree. And what is a tree? How's a tree organized? You got the stump, and let's say that's the entry point of your story. And all those arteries that turn into branches, right, is every single thing that the audience could have conceived of to create an ending for this film. Now, there's an overlay. There's an overlay with this metaphor. You are to exhaust everything that they thought was going to occur, and you have to come up with a better ending. Something they never thought could have possibly happened, but makes more sense than everything that they thought up. When you're designing your script, which is going to be the first piece of software we're going to get into, this can be one of the most enjoyable moments of your life when you finally crack this. Don't be surprised if it takes you months, years to get that little twist at the end that makes sense. Now, within that metaphor, that you have to find something that is not on this original tree, which is what the audience brought in when they came in. Now, of course, you're going to have some genius that might figure out your ending anyway, but those are exceptions. Your average audience member will have seen you try every single branch and it just doesn't work. And they're like, oh my God, how's this going to end? It's going to be amazing. There's only 5 minutes left and it's over. Introduce a new tree, and this one's your tree. The new tree is the following. You have however many hundreds of ideas that aren't on that first tree. You have to go into every single possibility of the second tree and find the very best alternate ending that could ever be written. This will help you in several dimensions. One, the audience will love you to death if you pull this off. But two, when you go into a screenplay evaluation, a rewrite with some folks that are just drooling to tear your script apart, if you do your job right, they will try other branches that you've already tried. And they'll say, well, you know, we're thinking this could happen, that could happen. And if you've done your job right, you go, well, you know, I thought that too. That's actually a really good idea because I had the same exact idea. But here's, you know what I found? This, and this doesn't work. And it breaks the ending that's the ending right now. And eventually they'll go, oh, yeah, okay, well, yeah, all right, well, that's good. I guess we'll just keep it the same, you know. Now, sometimes they just got to pee on a script because they want to do that right. So let's talk about characters real quick. Then we'll get to software, which is a step. It's a very story premise setup here. So we know we've got usually a protagonist, which is your good guy, and then your antagonist is bad guy being a generic term. Your hero and your villain, right? Easy for me to say. You know, most likely, unless you're writing a very eccentric script, you're going to need to have other characters. Here's your discipline for the other characters. Because screenwriting is not a book, you're never going to write what someone thinks in a screenplay. Every single thing that these people think is going to have to be either exuded in the body, which, I will write facial expressions that mean something. If it's something like I'm locking in on a person's face and a character's face and they're like doing one of those gestures, which for the podcast listeners, I just made the face of like WTF, okay? You can write that in there, but not too much. And it should be backed up almost immediately by some dialogue that echoes that sensibility. Okay, so let's say Sarah Connor. I don't remember exactly how her scenes went, but there's something about she goes to work somewhere. Well, you can show her going to work, but what does she think about her job? Does she like her job? Does she not like her job? What kind of person is she? What kind of food does she eat? What kind of television shows? Is she in a mode to pick up guys at all, right? Like what if she was divorced and here comes this guy saying he's, you got to listen to me. There's a robot coming after you. And she reads it as, oh, this is a bad pickup line. But if we did a couple scenes ahead of time where someone's hitting on her at the grocery store or at work and she's like, I'm freshly divorced. I'm not looking for anything. Then you know more about her and how she's going to react to somebody else. So there's little bit parts where someone will just trigger a reaction. Those are can be more in number in your script, but they're only going to be in a couple little paragraphs here and there as they're pulling action out of our characters. But the reason why films typically will have supporting actors that are buddies, there's alliances with everyone. So everyone you bring in is either going to be helping the good guy or helping the bad guy, or maybe they're sort of indifferent in between. Someone who doesn't really care if either side wins. So what I do is I create a character map. I just use some diagramming software on my computer, but you can use a piece of paper and a pen. You write your protagonist's name at the top of the page with a little bit of space around it. You go down towards the bottom, you write your antagonist's name, your villain. Put a circle around them once you write their names. Don't put the circle first. Then you start writing who you think needs to be in this film, because you should be seeing this pretty clearly if you got a pretty good idea. And don't worry about getting rid of characters that you thought you needed and adding characters that you never saw initially. That's fine. Once you add the other bubbles, if they tend to lean towards the good side, write them on the top half of the page. If they're lying towards the bad person, write them towards the bottom of the page. Then start connecting lines between them. What I typically do is on one side of the line, I write their mechanical relationship, their physical relationship with the person, brother, sister, friend. On the other side of the line, I write to myself what their purpose is, to, pull out their past, to tell them not to do it, supportive, non-supportive. Once I've got that, I kind of have a picture of my script. Another little thing I'll put in here, just in case this is helpful. If your script has a lot of geographical changes in where people are at any one particular point in time, you may end up creating literally a geographical map, whether it be a globe, flat picture of all of the continents, or just America or Europe or wherever this is taking place, and show step one, they're here, here, here. You might even put the act numbers on top of where they physically are, so you kind of know whether or not the logistics of your movie, which we're going to get into, makes sense, okay? So software. Here's what I do. I use Microsoft Word. Use your best, most coveted word processor. Pages, Word, whatever, something Unix, whatever. We're going to use a George Lucas trick in this. He brilliantly figured out that each act has a minimum of about 12 scenes, because scenes sometimes run long, sometimes run short. The average is pretty amazing. Even though it's 30 minutes you're responsible for, think about it. If every scene was 2 minutes, you'd have 24 pages. Well, some are going to be 5-minute scenes, some will be 6-minute scenes, some of them, and this is not changing internal, external designations in your settings. It is a clump of beats that go together to create a sequence, which we're going to get into, some terminology here. So here's what's cool about this 4-act system. You're going to write 12 scenes, 12 scenes, 12 scenes, 12 scenes. Boom, you've got a major backbone of your script. Now, of course, you're going to have probably some extra scenes. Don't feel bad if you go to 15. You might even go to 20. You can cut back later on. It's better to have more to cut back on, right? Ask Michelangelo when he was cutting marble, would you rather have less marble or more marble when you make a mistake? You always want more, because you can take it away forever. But you can't, not forever, but you can take away more than add it to it. There's nothing more frustrating than you have your script pretty well locked up, but your act 2 is like 20 pages long. It's not like Hollywood would frown on a great idea. One thing that McKee says is that your script, you could have misspellings, bad grammar, maybe even bad formatting, but if your story's fantastic and a reader gets caught throwing your script away simply due to minor grammar problems, not major grammar problems. And I don't worry about grammar as much as like transposing words incorrectly and that kind of stuff. They'll get fired for throwing away a great script that's written badly. And they'll get fired also for putting through a really well-written script mechanically, but a super boring premise and bad story. So that they're on your side, okay? McKee will tell you that they spend nearly $750 million a year looking for good scripts. Now, again, the brain trust in Hollywood, which I'll try to touch on before this is over, is definitely dwindling. It may be returning in some sectors and going away in others, but there's a mechanical reason for that. So let's say you've got these bullets. You've got these 48 bullets that are your script. Now what? So if you're using bullets in your favorite screenwriting software, what happens when you go to the end of a bullet and hit return and then hit tab? It starts a sub-bullet. Well, your next step is to sub-bullet as much as you possibly can the events and moments that need to occur, including which characters are in that particular scene. You know, in the case of like Terminator, it would be a scene that says the Terminator reaches Sarah Connor's house. John, I forgot what the father's name was. The Connor guy's there, and she's there. And so you would say, knocks on the door. Sarah answers the door. He says, "Are you Sarah Connor?" And then, boom, everything takes off. He shoots, they run, thus the car blows up, whatever happens. You're just going the escape out the back on a motorcycle or whatever it is. Detail all of those bullets as much as you possibly can. You may or may not use all of your ideas. But here's where you get into an area that I think is, out of all the books that I own, out of all the classes that I've been to with McKee, out of all the conversations I've had with people about screenwriting, this entire subject is never discussed unless you are sitting down with someone who's in the middle of writing their script, you're writing yours, or you're working together on a script. It's called logistics. Logistics is, where are you physically? And how did you get to the next location? What time of day is it? Is it night? Is it day? And make sure that everything works out. If you know that they have to be on a motorcycle in Utah in the summertime, how'd they get there? Especially if your characters start in New York City on some snowy day. But you have this desert scene you know has to happen. You have to figure that out. You have to make it make sense. You have to measure as a writer and as a viewer yourself, is it believable? I mean, them going from one place to another? To the degree you're a good logistical writer. I think this is one of my personal strengths, because the comment I always get back, no matter what the edits are, is, man, this thing flowed beautifully. That's your logistical brain, bringing it all together. I've said several times on different shows that when you role play and you become the game master that runs the role-playing exercise with your friends, whether it be Dungeons and Dragons, Champions, a million other systems that are out there, you will learn logistics super duper fast. Otherwise, they will tell you they're not playing anymore. You will also be writing great premise and story live, because they're not going to do anything that you set up on the day before. That makes you a great writer. Trust me. Now, you could also subconsciously draw from everything you've ever seen in your lifetime. You have to be a little bit careful with that. Every time you put a cliche out into your script, here's what happens. There's one thing that you might consciously understand, which is, wow, this is a big glaring cliche, and they're going to notice. It's in that other movie. But even if you're sneaky enough to sneak a cliche into your film, and cliches can be lines like, no, or we got to get out of here. There's a bomb in here. The audience will feel it subconsciously. And your splash rating is going to go down and down and down. Your ice skating rink, triple axle is going to go down, 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 down in their brain. And they may not consciously realize it. So the way to keep away from those risks within your script, and, if you're going to give it to an agent, you know how many scripts agents read? They read 4 to 6 scripts a week. Or if they haven't read the whole thing themselves, they got someone else reading it, and they're in there, and as soon as they start seeing you try to pawn off someone else's idea or someone else's mechanism, they're going to get frustrated with you personally. You might even not even know your name. The reader's the same way. So try to avoid that, okay? Even cliche characters. If you put together a posse of people, if you have the smart guy, the dumb guy, the super geeky guy, the romantic girl, it better be a comedy, okay? Where they're like, oh, I see what you did, Jumanji. And then you handled it beautifully, right? Jumanji 2 is a masterpiece of writing for that type of film. So once you've got your outline and you've blown it up, your character map's pretty healthy. You've reduced your character map down to the smallest number of characters needed to get your script written. Because every character that's put into your script is another number, and the phone number you got to memorize, right? What would be better to memorize, a 7-digit number or a 10-digit number? What's easier? Lower the numbers, the better. It also gives you more screen time with each one of the characters. So a lot of films, usually the main character or the villain is on screen at every single scene that's in your film. The other characters are usually just there to, again, pull dialogue out, to make things funny, to make things interesting. That's why they exist. And if they're not doing it, it's not worth it. Okay, So now we're at the point now where you might start double-clicking your favorite screenwriting software. I use Final Draft. I used to use Screenwriter 2000. Either one of them is great. There's some online tools out there. I personally would not put my screenplay into a online service unless I wrote the product myself and could encrypt the living crap out of it on both ends before it transmits. Now, once you get into the actual writing of your screenplay, there's a whole nother level that you need to understand. And that is the beat. A beat is a single moment of action in your script. It's action, meaning Joe walks across the room, and it's every line of dialogue that a particular character speaks. Everything needs to have complete purpose in your script. If anything you wrote because you're just writing stuff in, again, write everything you could think and then cut it back. You want to use language at the most optimized level to get the most impact for what you're trying to do in a particular scene. If fixing coffee has no purpose in your script, then they don't do it. But if they do it, it needs to have some accent to the emotion they're having. They're really tired, so they're going to fix themselves some coffee. And that's going to lead into the emotion that's happening next. But believe it or not, and if you're totally new to this, it's going to seem a little weird, but this is a big, big deal when they read your script. And this is why it's like, I've seen tons of movies. I can write my own movie. Brace yourself. Every beat is supposed to, according to Robert McKee, and I have to agree with him 100%, and it's not easy to do, it needs to reverse charge. What's that mean? One beat is positive. The next beat is negative. Next beat is positive. Next beat is negative. And this goes on and on and on until you conclude a scene. It's either going to end on a positive, it's going to end on a negative, or it can end on double negatives, triple negatives, or double positives and triple positives. I'll let you guess where they happen, right? Unless you want this to be a tragedy at the end of your movie, the end of your Act 4, that's where all the pluses start happening. The hero starts winning. The end of, there's two endings to Fifth Element, right? There's the ending when they finally get all the stones together and Bruce Willis is hugging Lilu, Corbin Dallas. He hugs her and they look up and this light beam comes out of both of them and knocks that, freezes that ball, that Cthulhu ball that's coming down in the world. Then the other ending is they're shacking up inside the tube, making love for the first time. So positive, 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 all the way to the very end. But boy, before that, you got negative, negative, negative. How many times have you seen a scene where all they had to do was put a key in a lock and turn it? And they get there and they drop the key and it goes down into a drain and they're never going to see that key again. So, oh my God, what are they going to do? They try to stick something else in the lock hole and they're trying to turn it with the screwdriver. And oh my God, they break the lock. They break the screwdriver off in the lock. Man, what are you going to do to get that thing? It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. McKee has a term called the negation, which is sort of a term for the negative conclusion of an event. You could have the negation of the negation. You can stack up as many of those as you can. Stacking over two, you better be a pretty damn good writer. But what do we mean by this charge changing thing? Well, here's the reason why they invented this discipline. It took me a little while to understand it, but by God, when you get it, it will fix all your scenes and it will give you a tool to evaluate a scene to see if you need to rewrite it or just throw the thing away. Now, again, in comedies, this is a little bit different. If you've ever seen Pee Wee Herman's Great Adventure movie, there is a scene where it shows the mechanical devices he uses to make breakfast in the morning, and that must have been at least a page worth of mousetrap explanation. Full on what we call exhibition. Exhibition is something we typically cut out of a script. You're just showing off, and you're not doing a writer's job of explaining a story. You're just telling them a story. I was watching this French show on Netflix, which is actually fairly interesting. It's kind of Black Mirror-ish without any weird tech. It's called El Innocent, which means the innocent in Spanish. And they do a lot of narration over storylines. It's very well written, but that's not what we do in the United States. We don't narrate over something. We typically, if we do, it's very sparing. The first Blade Runner cut that was ever done, the studio made Ridley Scott made Deckard narrate over himself to explain his life, and Ridley Scott's going, look, man, I did a great film. There's no need for this. And so when he got a chance to recut it, immediately took out that, and it survives beautifully without it. It does have sort of a gumshoe feel, like a 1930s movie, a noir film, but it's unnecessary. But here's the thing. If you had a scene with all positive charges, let's just say, hey, honey, how you doing? I'm doing great. Well, that's good. I'm going to go here. That sounds great. I'm going to do this. Well, that sounds great. Now, if that's a liar movie, Dumb and Dumber, fine. It's just silly Truman Show kind of dialogue to set up this weird idealistic world that exists, right? But in a real film of like any normal drama, you want to have someone trying to do something and it doesn't work out for them. Either they're trying to have a decent conversation with someone, and for whatever reason, that person's having a bad day, they're having a good day, and it's just constantly friction going back and forth between the characters. That's interesting. So this is where we get to the other concept. And you're going to fold this into your outline. It's called the gap. This is I don't know if McKee came up with this terminology. He teaches it, though. It's a big, big part of this thing. In order to facilitate this change of positive to negative, what you essentially do is, as your character attempts to do something, you stop them. You stop them with a person. You stop them with an object. You stop them with an act of God, whatever it is. Don't get too crazy, because we're going to talk about the Deus Ex Machina before it's over. One of the most literal gaps you'll ever see is in that San Andreas movie with The Rock. The San Andreas movie is about Rock and his wife in Los Angeles having their kid in San Francisco, and the earthquake starts in San Francisco, if I have that right. So now they have to haul ass to San Francisco to save their daughter. They're driving on the road, but the earthquake is starting to make its way down to Los Angeles, because this is the San Andreas Fault popping all the way down. And the road literally goes boom. And there's one car, I think, goes into the hole, and they have to stop their car, and they're looking at a chasm they can't jump. And they're like, oh my God, how the hell are we going to get to our daughter now? Now, luckily he was like some paramilitary guy, jumps in a plane and flies him to the next thing, because he was a helicopter pilot, I think, for the news agency or something like that. That's a literal gap. That was funny to see when I was watching it, because it was like, yeah, of course, that would be part of an earthquake movie, but man, that is like right in your face. But a more subtle one would be someone wants to go across the street to get a coffee, and in doing so, they get hit by a car or something else. They get mugged. The coffee shop blows up just before they get there, and they live through it. And it's linked to some other big thing that's trying to happen. Someone knew they were going to go into the coffee shop because they always go in there at 8 o'clock, but they got cut off by a bum going up to them. Hey, you got some money? And that little delay saved their life. Again, try and stop them. Try, stop it. And that's one way to physically gap them. The other one is the relationship that they've been in for 20 years starts to fall apart the morning they want to go do something very simple. And they thought they were going to get up and do this simple thing, and they find themselves in the argument of all arguments. And because the other person's already made up their decision, made up their mind to break up that morning, and supposedly there's no writing on the wall for our main character, they try to salvage the relationship. But we're still doing no, but no. But no. So the buts are yeses, they're positives, and the no's are the negatives, and they're just having this horrible conversation. Their life is falling apart right before your very eyes. But now let's talk about dialogue for a split second. Because there's good dialogue and there's bad dialogue. And there's a very easy mechanism to find out if you're in good dialogue. And there's very easy ways to find out if you're in bad dialogue. Now, I'll give you an example of dialogue that we write for children. If you're familiar with the old cartoons when you were a kid, maybe you watched Scooby-Doo. This happens in Star Wars Clone Wars as well, because there's children watching. Okay, children aren't as insightful as adults, right? Because we know what people mean sometimes when they're not saying it, which is what we're going to go for. Or they're not saying it blatantly, but they're saying it underneath, subtextually saying it. In Scooby-Doo, you would have them get to, there's actually a real cartoon, I saw this after I took some classes. They're on some drawbridge to a castle. And there's like a lever that needs to be pulled to bring the drawbridge down so they can cross. And the dialogue goes something like, "We need to find a switch to pull to bring down the drawbridge. Oh, I found this switch. You mean if I pull this down, it's going to make the drawbridge? Yeah, pull that switch, it'll make the drawbridge." 3 times in a cartoon, stating the blatantly obvious, yeah, just pull this lever, make it go down. But they're driving home into children the mechanism that's causing this bridge to come down. Probably overdid it in the one I saw, but who knows? I'm not a kid writer. That's what we call on-point dialogue. You are saying exactly what you mean. Now, you can do that. You can do that as maybe one line in an exchange between 2 people, but it should be almost, if you're going to do it, it should be this profound, almost duh moment in the dialogue. Yes, I'm saying I hate you, but up until that point, you want to be off point. I give an example in my previous episodes that goes something like this. And I've got a bunch of episodes that detail a bunch of other aspects of screenwriting, so definitely get into the playlist for that if this is something you want to experiment with or it's something you already do. Or you're getting into the business and you need to know how to do this and you don't want to have anyone sneak a bad script on you. Guy comes home. It's 10 o'clock. He comes into the living room of his house, and his wife is in her robe. She looks annoyed. Doesn't look normal. You know something might be wrong. And she says, little salutation, how you doing, honey? Maybe she doesn't even say anything. She just gets her tea and sits down or whatever. And she said, I think we should plan a big vacation this year. And he looks at her like, "What do you mean, dear?" She says, "Well, with all this extra money we're making with your overtime, I think we should go on a big vacation." You see him kind of get a little uncomfortable. He says, "Well, I don't know about that. We gotta put our money away for retirement and stuff." She goes, "No, I think we need to do that. I mean, come on, you are working late every single night. I mean, what did you put in today? It's 10 o'clock. I mean, what did you put in, an extra 4 hours tonight? You've been doing this 3 or 4 times a week. I think we should get away. You could probably use a getaway. Can't you, honey?" What is she really saying? She's calling out a bluff on the guy that he's cheating on her or doing something he's not supposed to be doing in these extra hours and giving her the excuse that he's working overtime. Her demeanor is that she doesn't believe him. She's calling him out. Well, if you're really putting all this overtime, then there should be a bigger check. Maybe it's a classic moment in American history or whatever where the guy works and the woman doesn't. He doesn't really have the extra money. So this big plan is completely designed by her to call his bluff. Whatever he says, whatever she says is evasive, but to the point on the subtext. Any dialogue that you're going to write should be saying exactly what you want it to say, but you shouldn't just come right out and say it. You should find a clever way of pulling that out of people. So you go to your controlling idea and you find out what your movie's all about. What is it all about? Is it good against evil? Is it love conquers all? I mean, those are the classics. You should have something more detailed. One of the things I try to recommend to people, and I tell my students, is that if you want to really know what your script's about, you need to be able to write a paragraph about your film that's probably 2 to 3 sentences, and everyone's going to completely feel the setup of your first act and want to see your film from those 2 to 3 sentences. You might think that's impossible. Well, I'll give you a little cheat sheet you can work with. Go onto Netflix, go into The Twilight Zone, probably whatever service you have, as long as they've got the paragraph written by, I believe, CBS, which I guess Rod Serling must have submitted when he wrote the show or created the show. He wrote half the episodes. It'll be typically 2 sentences. And if you've seen the episode, especially, you'll know they've set it up perfectly in 2 sentences. Well, at some point, either Rod, who controlled the show, knew that he had gold on his hands because he just crapped gold bars, or all of his other writers, Charles Beaumont, Earl, all these amazing writers, they had to pitch him on an idea. Well, they had to come up with these 2 to 3 sentences to get him to go, okay, and then tell me how it ends. What's the twist? But honestly, with those guys, they probably saw the twist at the end. Now, we have gotten more clever in some ways with writing screenplays, and we've gotten way more ignorant in how we write screenplays. My teacher, McKee, if you take his introductory class, which I don't know, when I took him, it was 3 days, 12 hours a day, and by God, don't bring your cell phone. It will end up in a pile of very dead cell phones. You're to pay attention. You're not to talk unless he calls on you. You have to raise your hand, but you're not to raise your hand unless he is saying, does anyone have any questions, which he rarely does. But he shows you Casablanca, which I think is 45. I've misquoted the date several times in other episodes, and I apologize. I put it in the 30s for some reason. Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman, former lovers, split up in Paris when the Germans rushed into Paris. He ends up in Casablanca, and I believe Morocco, and he's running a nightclub, and it's German occupied like crazy, and he's just kind of a hustler. He obviously has his club, which has booze and food, but he's also in the black market selling passports and stuff to get people out of the country, greasing all the right palms. I believe it's French-controlled prior to Nazi occupation. And wouldn't you know it, his ex rolls into the club with her husband, who she said had died, and they need passports, and they need to get him from Rick, who's Humphrey Bogart's character. So he's conflicted. He's like, one, you're a big liar. I kept my end of the deal. I went to the train station in Paris, and you never showed up. So why should I help you? Her husband was a big French underground guy. And so she's like, man, I thought he was dead. I was told that he was dead, and then I heard right before I was supposed to come meet you that he was actually alive. So I didn't know what to do, so I ran to my husband, of course. Will you help us? Now, here's the thing. This, other than just watching an amazing film, the script is supposed to be around 176 pages, acted out in under 100 minutes. That means America spoke faster, was smarter, and we have been dumbed down with multiple techniques, okay? So understand that we used to rail through scripts, and they didn't just talk fast out of some weird style. It was how we talked. Yes, you could probably find an area of America that still talked slower than we do today, but that was probably the exception. These were movies that did really well in the movie theater with multiple millions of people going to see them. There's something called the image system. This is something usually the cinematographer and the director will come up with, but you can hint things into your scripts that is part of your writing, and it makes your script have a style and a romantic sort of overlay of imagery on top of what you're trying to do. In the movie Casablanca, there's 2 image systems which I want to bring to your attention, which I didn't know these things existed. When you're in Casablanca, you're in a jail. You're in this city occupied by the Germans, and it's rough. What they do with Ingrid Bergman is she'll wear white and black stripe clothing a lot. Well, what does that represent visually, subconsciously to the viewer? Well, back in the day, that's the kind of outfit you wore when you were in prison. They made you look really weird in an outfit that no one wore in public, so if you ever escaped, they'd see your clothes and know you're an escaped prisoner. As well, to reinforce this, there's a lot of light shining in through windows, through skylights and stuff. And when those things shine down on the characters, very often in the script, you will see bars on everybody. It's just the way the windows are cut, but it shows bars. More of this metaphor of being captured, being in a prison. Utterly brilliant. Not so hard to do once you understand your controlling idea and what you're trying to do in this script emotionally. Another little Chotsky before we move on is that every time Ingrid Bergman is sitting with her husband in any one of the scenes, there's an object between them, a lamp, a post, something in between them, reinforcing the fact that they're together, but she's still her own person. Again, not so difficult to write into your script, and it will show that you have a much deeper understanding of what you're doing. And it could be like the pinch point in the script, something to keep the audience kind of riveted to your script in the middle of lulls of just, hey, how long could you take a back rub? Really? 30 minutes, maybe an hour, but after about an hour and a half, it's going to be like, okay, get your hands off me. It's starting to hurt now, right? That's what a script can do to their audience, no matter how well it's written. You need to shake it up just a little bit. So the readers need the same thing. Not only is your story cool, but they need to just realize that they're reading a master writer. So why not start off at the very beginning, writing really, really well, right? So when you go into your screenwriting software, you've got your cheat sheet now over to the side. Now it's going to change, right? You're going to find out your logistics didn't quite work out in a couple areas, if not a bunch of areas. And you're going to find out that, you thought that scene should be there, but it should be down there. If you take a night scene, you put it in a day socket, you need to make sure that night and day doesn't mess with your scene. Little mechanical logistics, right? When I wrote my very first film, finished my very first film, I should say, in 2000, I was about halfway through writing it, and I was doing a technique that you can do in your house. I do it too every once in a while. The more complex the script, the more I actually physically do this. You get note cards. And instead of just putting in your word processing software, you write all the scenes on note cards, which one will make you really refine the name of your scene because you only want like 3 words, 4 tops. And you use tape and you create a group of 12 cards, 12 cards, 12 cards, 12 cards. Or you mix it up however you need to, right? Well, I realized that I was so gung-ho it was a horror film, very sophisticated horror film. I was killing people off too quickly. And by the time I got to my end of Act 2, I barely had anybody left. I was like, whoa, God, this is ridiculous. And so what I ended up doing was I created a little technique. And on my card, when I killed somebody, I wrote a skull on it. Big felt pen, so I could see it. And I realized that I killed 6 people before Act 2. Well, what the hell am I going to do with my script? What I realized was, okay, time to pace things out. And what I ended up doing is the further I moved down these skulls, down into the deeper parts of my script, it made more sense and it was more motivating. It meant more to the audience when they died. Gave me more time to put them on screen. So let's talk very briefly about screen time. I'm going to give you a level 10 script example, which if you're still watching movies, this will make a lot of sense to you. Take the Marvel Avengers franchise, Well, what is Avengers? It's a bunch of superheroes, all of which pretty much have their own movies. Okay, so you stuff them all into a script. Now let's say the studio says to you, okay, we want this to be at least 3 hours long. Okay. So you gained another 60 pages. That's very helpful. I've heard that Robert Downey Jr. said that he wanted to be, as part of his contract, on camera 25% of the movie. Whoa. Now 75% of the movie has to be shared among all the other actors. Who knows if the other actors' agents were able to leverage in 10% here, all this other stuff, trying to eat up the other 75%. It may be that Robert Downey Jr. got more time than 25%. If he can share a scene with someone, then it's a nice overlap. But you have an economy in your script. Let's just stick with 2 hours. Your characters, all of them, they're going to have an economy of how many minutes they show up on the camera. The second you need them, they should show up, and the second you don't need them, they should be out of the game. because having a bunch of like characters standing around doing nothing is very noticeable to your audience. So just keep that in mind as you invent new characters for your script. I want to also bring up something that is a scene I recently just understood, which was in John Carpenter's movie They Live, which is a movie I will have recently talked about in a script. In a show, sorry. There's a 10-minute fight scene in this script. The script is about aliens having infiltrated the world, and they're broadcasting this signal such that we can't see them unless you put on these glasses that these dudes developed. Ronnie Piper, the amazing wrestler, was the lead character in this movie. Does an amazing job in this film. It's where you get that line. I came here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of gum. That's the movie. Go see it. But his counterpart in the film is this other actor, brilliant actor, who is trying to lay low. He's like, man, I don't want any trouble. I just want to go to work on a construction site, come home, don't make any problems for us. But this Ronnie Piper character is noticing there's weird stuff going across the street, and he ends up bumping into these glasses, taking them out in the streets of LA and noticing, oh my God, we've been infiltrated. And he is trying to tell his buddy that this is what's going on. His buddy it's not that he won't believe him, but he's like, don't bring me into this. Don't even show me the glasses. I don't want to know. And he says, put the glasses on. They're in this alleyway. He says, put these glasses on so you can see what I'm saying, so you don't think I'm crazy. And he's like, I don't want to put the glasses on. He says, put the frickin' glasses on. Then they start fighting. And this scene goes on. I think I've heard it recently in a documentary. It was 10 minutes long. If it's not 10 minutes, it's just shy of 10 minutes. It goes on. Imagine watching a fight scene for 10 minutes. So people watched this film and they were like, John, why did you make a fight scene 10 minutes? Isn't that just exhibition and stupidity? No, John Carpenter is anything but an exhibitionist. John Carpenter is anything but an idiot. He told whoever asked him the question, he says, I made it 10 minutes because sometimes you have to beat the shit out of someone to get them to see the truth. And that's what that scene's all about. When you hear those moments in time in film, you are listening to a pinnacle moment in a master director / writer / musician / everything dude. You need to steal those techniques for your own writing. Understand what you're doing. Understand the tension and release mechanism of your script. When you play a video game, something becomes very apparent to you. There is a moment when the game is not really easy. You jump into the game and it's really easy. And then you have what's called the boss fight, right? In the boss fight, usually you've got a few kind of tough guys before you get to the ultimate boss, but that boss is a pain in the ass, right? You got to find out how to kill the boss. Tension, 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 tension. Maybe even die a couple times. You finally kill it and then poof, you get this huge drop of dopamine. It's amazing. Then what do you expect to happen? Do you expect to get another boss right after the boss? No. You go back down to a much easier level. Maybe not the same easiness as the very first moment you started the game, but way below that boss. And then you know what's going to happen. You're going to build up, build up, build up, and hit another boss. Dopamine drop. Reward system. Yay. Go back down again. The arc of a great video game design that uses boss technology to tell a story is that it's going to go up, then down, then up higher than it was before in the previous peak, then down, probably even down further than the first boss. And it's going to eventually keep going up and down. You're going to get equipment. You're going to be stronger so you actually can kill bigger bosses. But it's the zigzaggy slope that goes up. As you're writing your script and creating what we call turns, which we've talked about, because you're going to turn all the time. Someone learns something new. They learn that the job that they need to do requires something they don't have. It's harder and harder and harder. That keeps the script moving forward. Think of Luke Skywalker. They try to go rescue the princess. They go into the detention center. And what was it? Cell 1138, right? Well, they get in there, and it's pretty damn easy. They got to fight the guys, and then Han Solo does that funny little talk to the command center. Oh, screw this, and he shoots the console. And he knows, he goes, look, we're going to have company. They just wanted to get the princess and get her out of there. But every step of the way, things happened. They had to fight the guards. Then they couldn't make it. They couldn't BS the guy on the radio. So he shoots the radio and tells them, look, they're coming. Sure enough, they show up really quickly. Now they're in a firefight. They can't get out of the hallway. What the hell are they going to do? Princess Leia takes the gun and goes boom and shoots the grate. And she says, come with me, flyboy. And they all go down to the trash compactor. Well, now they're safe, right? They just have to go through the door and exit into the main Death Star and escape. But the trash compactor turns on and starts trying to crush them. On and on to the break of dawn, right? Your job is to create fun, entertaining gaps that just keep happening. Then there's a release. You feel like they're going to be okay. You gap them again. It's a little bit better than the previous one. I mean, think about it. What was more energetic and interesting? Shooting the guards to get into the detention center, or the trash compactor? Trash compactor was nuts, right? You got this. Not only are the walls coming in, but they turned it one more time by putting that slithering beast in the water. Keep your imagination open constantly, and you'll find gold, okay? So what are the timetables we're looking at here? It is not uncommon, okay? I will tell you that probably the longest script I ever put together, really, okay, I was hired by Chris Hemsworth's manager to write Cuchulainn for him. They gave me, without a joke, printed paper that was at least a foot thick, 8 by 10, and 2 books and some other junk on top. And I had, about 6 months to put together a treatment, which was a script. I wrote it very specifically in sort of a fairy tale voice. We clipped scenes that I loved. We added new scenes that blew me away. And he got stuck having to choose between the Huntsman sequel, which flopped, which, took years and years to know that was going to be just a release to video kind of thing, or my script. And then the buddy of his, they broke off and, they know each other, but they don't work together in the film business anymore. So I'm sitting with this script. I'm thinking, man, this thing needs a lot of work. I've been to more courses. I've refined my craft. I wrote a sequel for Tron 3, which I'm going to do a full treatment of for you guys. I've already filmed it. I just got to get it all together and edit it, explaining the script to you and what I did. So I went back and I blew the dust off that script and rewrote it from scratch, taking in some of the comments he had about the script and folding it on. And I think it's a very, very strong script. And there's a lot of people supposedly want to do this script. So if I total together all the time for Cuchulainn, it's probably 2 years. Definitely 6 months of research. And there's a million ways they've told that guy's story. It's been corrupted by other religions and all this other stuff. I cleaned it all up. But then it took me probably about 3 months to write it. And again, it just immediately needed to be rewritten. And again, I probably spent another 8 months minimum on the rewrite. It's never done. But last year, I finished a rom-com that I've been thinking about in my head. Thought I would never write the thing. I don't know what it was. And there was a little mechanism that got added to the script by me visiting my friend's house and going to his bathroom, and there was something on the wall that I added to the script, and it blew the script up, and I finished it in 4 months from start to finish. Always can be rewritten, always can be made better, but it's pretty damn strong, and it's a funny, funny film. And it's got a sort of Raising Arizona feel to it, I didn't rewatch that movie. I haven't seen Raising Arizona for 25 years. I could just remember the premise of it. So just understand that outline part of the script could take you 1 to 2 years. Could take you a lot less. Could take you just a couple weeks. Here's the cool thing. I know that you're itching to double click your screenwriting software. The faster you go into that without having your outline all worked out, you're going to crash and burn in your screenwriting software and think that you're not made for this industry. But you could be. Stick with your outline until it is so well written that you just need to transfer it into the screenwriting software. When it comes to the charge system, right? Positive and negative beats. Understand that if you set up your scene outline correctly, you've got enough tension in there you're going to be overflowing with the ability to make someone positive, someone negative, someone positive. You can even flip them. Someone else who was negative went positive, and then you flip it down. When they, again, see a bunch of positives, they're going to flush the scene. A bunch of negatives, they're going to flush the scene because you're just exhibitioning nonsense in most cases. But now let's talk about the industry for a closing section here. 2020 has potentially fatally damaged the film industry for a very long time. But we do have other mediums out there, but here's the problem. The numbers are changing in terms of how much you can make from an online release. They will never, ever, ever come close to theater release revenue with an online release. It doesn't matter how much they try to pump it. And why? How does a theater mechanically work? Can you just bring your whole family and pay one low fee per month or one rental fee for the whole family? It's like $15 to $20 to see a film in California. Well, you used to have to pay that for every human being that walked in the door. Now you only pay that. Let's just say they throw it up at $29.99. That's a person and a half walking into the movie theater. It's all digitally distributed, so they're not out any cash. The movie theaters have to pay for themselves with those $16 8-ounce Cokes, right? So we have that challenge on our hands. Just keep that in mind as we talk about all this stuff. My goal is just to keep writing, have things ready, and if there's a rebound for a number of reasons, I'll have a whole pile of scripts ready to rock and roll, and they'll just be better and better and extremely diverse scripts, right? Now, you need to get someone to see your script, right? What was the traditional methodology of getting your script read? Well, way, way back when, you could actually find someone and mail them your script. Now they can't take your script. Why? Because they're incubating so many things at once that you could have written something very similar to something they already have, especially the more cliche and obvious your script is, they'll definitely have something in their queue that's just like it. That's why I write so far away from any cliche subject matter that if you have something like mine, it's a 1 in a million situation. I just guarantee it. My agent from William Morris Endeavor knows that for a fact, right? So there's a bunch of factors here. One, you know as well as I do that genres come and go. We're in a pretty good, for instance, space genre right now. Why? Because they want to go to the moon again and they want those space stuff constantly. They want you to pay for it. So they keep that franchise pumped. And everyone, sci-fi is great. I think all genres are great. And I think that, honestly, you could have Apple TV buying one genre, Netflix buying a different genre, Hulu buying a different one, and then the movie studios doing what they do, and then television channels doing what they do. But they do team up, and they do have people that simply go, well, what's popular now? Okay, let's get some more of that stuff. So you need to be aware of what's selling and what's not selling. How do you know? Turn on your TV and look at what's for rent. Go up and watch movie trailer videos on YouTube. And here's what you got to understand. If you're looking at sci-fi right now in plenty, don't start writing one unless you're willing to let it sit on the shelf for 10 years because they're sort of probably full of all the scripts they need to punch it out for the next 5 years. Go find something else. Go write a Western. Go write a fantasy movie, maybe redo King Arthur, whatever. Do something out of pocket or come up with your own genius idea that doesn't matter. They can rebrand it. A lot of you know enough about music to know that a country song can be rewritten as a rock and roll song. A rock and roll song can be rewritten as an R&B love song. If it's a good song, you could do those things. So write scripts to that avail, right? Now, getting your script to an agent is a really super tough thing. I will tell you that you really need friends in the business to introduce your script to somebody. If you have someone in your family that knows someone who's in that industry, whether it be an actor or they really have to be an actor because actors can do something with your script that even agents can't do. When Chris Hemsworth, his buddy came to me for this script, he said, look, here's what's going to happen. You're going to write the movie. We're going to keep working on it until it's great. And then Chris is going to walk into his agent and say, I'm making this. I'm willing to be in this. I'm a lead character in this. Well, then nobody has any problems. They cast everybody else into it. Chris is a lead guy. He pulls in ticket sales. Good to go. That's the way Tom Cruise rolls. He just tells people, I like your script. And then boom, it goes through the system. For instance, Oblivion, the movie Oblivion, you had Joe Kosinski, who just directed Tron Legacy. And as much as you might like that film, he was fired from Disney twice. But he developed Oblivion on the side using Disney's money, and they shared the revenue on it. But he showed it to Tom Cruise. And Tom loved it. So guess who directed Top Gun? So that's how it works if you know someone in the industry. But I mean, that's a tough sale, right? So now here's the other thing that you may need to write at some point. And there's a million ways to do this. I'll tell you the way I do it. When we got Kukulkan sort of to a point where it was readable, we had to write a treatment of it. And the treatment was broke down like the following. We had to give a quick short of what it was like to be in this film, the premise, the setup, everything. And then the actors that he thought would be good for various roles. Some of it's based on he was in an agency and they also had another actress. And so they thought, hey, she could probably play that role and they already have her signed up. So let's just put her in that role. They can always recast it later, but we're just selling a treatment. You cover things like your demographics. You cover, the pitch, the controlling idea. What's it like? That's another big question they ask you. And it's sort of an unfair question, especially when you write really original content. But they do want you to say, like, it's Excalibur meets Star Wars, it's Indiana Jones meets When Harry Met Sally, right? It's a weird thing, but they dig it. Then you have 10 pages, double-spaced, to write in story form, not in dialogue form, but in story form. And I did one line per line. I didn't let anything carriage return. So it's just line for 10 pages, start to finish, my entire script. The interesting thing is that it actually taught me a lot about my film, and I ended up making changes that went back to the main script. So you're handing in something that's about 16 pages long. Very palatable to someone who's going to evaluate the script. It is also, again, a great exercise to go back and look at what you've done. But even that needs to get in front of someone. Now, we do have the internet, so a lot of people I have known, well, I shouldn't say a lot, a few people I've known have tried to say, well, I'll just find everybody's email address and send it straight to them. Well, one, there's the legal barrier there. Two, if you go in unsolicited, you might get yourself on a list that will prevent you from ever getting into the system. A lot of writers get discovered by writing very small things for something that happens either in a play or a commercial, and then they get discovered. For instance, a friend of mine in the UK who is Crichton on Red Dwarf, a different dude was playing Crichton for the first 2 seasons, this really classically trained British actor. He eventually said, I don't know about this. I'm getting old and this is like, it's not really my thing. And so they were like, oh crap, this dude's going to quit. And he's one of the main characters of our show. Robert Llewellyn, who ends up playing Crichton, had written a play where he was a robot. Just so happened the producers from Red Dwarf went in and watched this play and thought, man, this dude's really got something tight. He's got a different walk. He's got something. He's different. So they said, look, we need a couple things. We need you to come up with a weird accent that's sort of androgynous to Europe and Americas, and we need you to have a weird walk. And the thing you were doing on stage was pretty cool, but we need a little bit more. So he, being a genius, he took Herman Munster's walk, made that Crichton's walk, and he mixed a Canadian-American accent together to create the voice of Crichton. And I don't know, 50,000 seasons later, they're still filming that show to this day, 2021. I don't know if they're doing it right now, but very successful. That's how he got himself in the game. And then that obviously charged up. He's doing Fully Charged, the show. But you need to have a warm introduction to folks. There are certain agencies, I believe CA in San Diego, you can really kind of introduce yourself. But again, you need to bring in some of your gold. One of the things that's sort of funny that I hear is that people will try to take in their first scripts with their first drafts. Even if they think that they've done 8 drafts, they're not really ready, let's just say, a lot of times. Or they'll say, man, I'm just going to write a script in a couple months, man. And you're like, oof. Have you ever written one before? No, but how hard could it be? Don't kid yourself, but also don't give up if this is something you want to do. What I do is I take my scripts, who I know my scripts are made for men because I'm a guy. I know that I've entertained myself with my own scripts. So what do? I purposely find women, both women I think that are made for the script and women I think will never like this script, and I'll pitch it to them. Or in some rare cases, I get them to sit down and I read the whole script to them. If I get them laughing at the right points, crying at the right points, I got it, because I know I've entertained myself. At the same time, you just get a band of friends that have nothing to do with the industry. They don't know anybody. And it's funny is people will worry about, oh man, I can't tell my idea to people. Okay, well, good luck. You just tell people that couldn't possibly recreate the script to anybody else. If you're worried about them potentially telling somebody, don't tell them your premise perfectly on point such that they can just repeat the premise to somebody else. Just read them your script and read it, act it out. I've done my current script 3 times to the producers who hired me to do the script. 3 different sessions. One of them took 2 days, one of them took 1 day, and one of them took 2 days. And boy, now I'm reading it into an MP3 to give to the producers so they can, as they're traveling, listen to the script. Believe me, when I'm reading my own dialogue, my own action, I'm finding things are overwritten. Dialogue doesn't flow off the tongue properly. It trips. And so I refine things. In your script, again, you want to use things as sparingly as possible. Understand that really long words and exhibitioning your vocabulary is a strike 1, 2, and 3. Don't do that. Know that if you want to slow down the mind of the reader, you can use slightly larger words. If you want to write an action scene, you need to pick little teeny words so it goes super fast. They're reading a big paragraph, but man, it just digested well. You will hear later on in life that you should have a style when you write a screenplay. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, that's a nice idea. 1, you will most likely have a style because you're a human being. But 2, you getting to a Tarantino level on your first script is probably only if you are as gifted as he is when he writes. And I'm sure that the first thing, Reservoir Dogs, wasn't the first thing he ever wrote. It was just the first thing he got made. But that dude's super gifted. Study them as hard as you possibly can. Find out what makes them what they are. You can try to plagiarize their writing style, but you'll find up in the end, 5, 10 years later, how silly you were to not just create your own style. If you're a very mild-mannered person and you are very flow with the trends of all things, if they say to grow a beard and you grow a beard, and they say wear these thick glasses because that's what we're all doing, make your hair a certain way because that's the way we're all wearing it, be careful, because you're probably going to write something extremely trite, something that's just like another one of those, bling, throw it away. You need to live a life that's a little bit more, whatever it is. In my generation, I would have said rock and roll. Whatever it is, be that incredible writer before you actually write. I mean, really make your fabric of your human being interesting, such that you walk into a room and for some reason you own it. Doesn't have to be you're the most pretty person or whatever. Maybe you're the funniest person. Maybe you're, I don't know, people just look to you for information or your observation on something. Maybe you just brighten their day, whatever it is, because that's going to bleed back into you as a feedback loop, fake it before you make it kind of thing. Prince always talked about pretending to be the superstar before he became one. He literally faked it till he made it. So you pick whatever hero you want to be. You can make it from scratch. You can pick this and that from some other person. But, we like David Bowie because he was not the same as everybody else. Pick any other star that you like. They're usually eccentric. Hollywood likes that. I mean, there's some darker versions of that, but they want you at parties. They want to talk to you. They want to call you on the phone to bounce an idea off, and they're going to pay you for every moment that you're there. The other one is be relatively honest with at least your core behind camera people. Don't lie about something being good when it's crap. Now, I promised I would tell you why the industry's changed prior to 2020. This is something that's very important that you understand about movie studios. And this was told to me by a guy who was in the industry for 20 years. He worked on Independence Day because his buddy was the director. Very key individual. I can't say his name. But he said to me in 2003, we're eating lunch, and he said, well, Hollywood's not the same. And I said, okay. I hadn't met my writing mentor yet. I said, well, okay, lay it on me. What is it? He said, well, back in the day, a Paramount Studios, a Universal, MGM, Sony, they had staff that were on full time. And when they made a film, it looked like a 20th Century Fox film, a UA, an Orion film. All these companies had people, when they made special effects, it looked like that studio's special effects. When the dialogue came out of the actors, it felt like a certain way. And you just knew. I mean, some of you know this from if you were alive and well in the 80s. Like Orion Pictures used to just make one blockbuster after another. They didn't buy a script unless it passed some list of requirements for Orion Pictures, right? And he said, okay, what they figured out was that the film students and film directors that then got promoted into being producers, and the producers got promoted into being heads of studios. They had done everything. They had held lights. They had written dialogue before. They had said cut. They looked through a camera. These people understood filmmaking. Well, as they got infiltrated by the money handlers because films got so expensive, imagine someone saying, okay, how much is this film? Oh, we think we can bring it in for $150 million. And someone's looking at someone else going, you want $150 million right now? Yeah. Okay, well, we'll give it to you, but our guy's going to have to become a pretty in charge dude in your studio. And eventually those white collar guys without film degrees moved into all the controlling roles of these studios. Once that occurred, they hired all their buddies to take care of the numbers. When that happened, they looked at the books and said, oh my God, if we just reduce creativity down to left brain ledgers, we should fire everybody except for maintenance staff to keep the lights on. And they all have to come back in as contractors. So what that did was that broke the studios from having their magic sauce. One, a ton of people don't know how to be self-employed. Most people in the world don't know how to be self-employed. Create your own little LLC so you can have good tax breaks. And people don't have phone numbers. They're not good at pitching themselves. So a tremendous amount of Hollywood disappeared for life. I mean, I've heard people dying of alcoholism in trailers because of this change. So now you've got this hodgepodgey thing going on. You might get a good designer for your movie, but if that guy's busy because another studio hired them, well, you might get the second best, and then the spaceship looks like crap, or the costumes look like crap, your dialogue's written horribly, and you don't have a good film. So that was another big part of the game that screwed up. Now, let's say you're lucky enough to get an agent. You might get a manager first. Be careful. They all take 10%. But you're getting a manager because managers are supposed to know your agents. I've got so many friends that say my agents have never done anything for me. And, I'm yet to have that total success. But my guy's my friend, and I know exactly what he's done. And apparently one of my scripts was literally going through the pipeline. 28 scripts down to 3. I was on the list. I was the number 1 script, and then COVID happens, right? When you go in to negotiate your contract, understand this. There's 2 factors to your contract. 1, upfront money for the script. 2, back-end points, although microscopic, they are significant for the final product. If you get upfront money, then you better know how to manage your money because you'll end up spending it all, and until you write another script that gets greenlit, you're not going to make any more money in this industry. So even a tiny little point in the back, you won't get a full point. But something in the back, because the agency is going to take points. That's their business. They bring good scripts in, they get points, and that's how the agency keeps the doors open in Rodeo Drive. So understand you have to lawyer up a little bit, try to get a good entertainment lawyer that is, however you can evaluate them to have a soul, make sure they're on your side. You might even sign a contract with them saying, this is what you're supposed to do for me, and if you fail to do this, I don't pay you a dime. So you got your motivation locked in place. A lot of times agencies won't tell you they're getting points on the back. They just wanted you to take the money with big Nathan R. Johnson eyes, and then you'll be okay. But you got to fight for what's yours. Copywriting your scripts. It costs about, I think, $25, something like that, to copyright your script. It only lasts, I believe, for 4 years. And here's the thing. You got to make sure you got enough money to pay for as many years as you think the script's going to be relevant. Which if you write a good script, it's until it's made. But if it falls out of copyright and it's in their database, guess what? It goes, hey, William Morris, here's a free script. Here's the thing. A lot of people get all copyrighted up in their scripts. I'll just tell you what my mentor, who has written and sold over 24 scripts in his lifetime, one was super legendary that he directed himself. Okay. I showed up with all this copyright crap all over my script, and he said, take all this crap off here. He said, just write your phone number and your name on the front, write whether or not you've WGA'd the thing, because I'm in California. And he says, just keep that up. But he goes, look, as soon as you hand in your script, they're going to see it. And as soon as they see it, they can poach from it. They're going to poach an idea, something that you can't quite control. It's just the name of the game. Now, when I met him, he had 2 scripts stolen from him, both of which were massive moneymakers. Okay, we're talking one of the Coen brothers films, which was legendary, okay, and one Disney movie, which is legendary, okay. And he was like, it's just the name of the game. So I said to him, well, why didn't you sue him? And he said, well, you can do it. Those guys that wrote Coming to America did sue the studio that made it, and I think they made $300 and something million. But here's what my writing teacher told me. He goes, you can do that one time. So you better make all your money in that one little lawsuit. But if writing is what you love to do, unless you can write and distribute your own film with your winnings from that lawsuit, you will never see one of your films make it out there. You're going to get on the blacklist. It's unfair, but welcome to Hollywood. In working with him on a script, we had it stolen and turned into Johnny Depp's Transcendence. Awful experience. I ate lunch with him, and he looked me in the face, and he goes, man, those other 2 were awful as well, but this is the worst. Because they ripped off the script to a point where you could read our script, watch the movie, and go, what the hell? You guys didn't even change a single thing. So it's a grown-up boy sport, let me just tell you. I guess one of the things you can do to insulate yourself is definitely distribute your scripts to your family members way before you give it to anyone else, so you have records of them actually having it. You could actually send it in registered mail to your relatives, sealed. When you copyright something, this is the way it works. You're sending your thing to get copyright. Now, it's all electronic today, so I'm probably talking database talk now, but back in the day, this is really for anything. It used to get put in an envelope that was sealed with the date on the front. If there was a contesting moment where you said, hey, I wrote that movie, they would say, no, we've had scripts just like this for years. And so you would contact the copyright agency. They'd send you your script in this bound envelope. It goes to court, sealed. The studio brings in their version. This is the old-fashioned way. And then they would basically compare the dates. Whoever has the oldest date, if the content matches, they got to open it up, make sure you're not lying. Then you win the case. That's the old way. Database-wise, I'm not quite sure. Can they just raid the database and sell back doors? Well, supposedly they could. But that's why I write extremely unique stuff. So that if it comes out, it's like, come on, there's no way you could have thought of that premise. There's no science fiction book. There's no horror book. This is unique. So do research on your genre for sure. So this is a lot longer than the original. Hopefully this is very helpful for you folks. And again, everyone has a story to tell. You could be young and not have a story yet. Keep this in the back of your mind. If you are interested in this subject matter, there are varying levels of quality of other episodes in this playlist on YouTube. If you want to go to deepthoughtsradio.com, there's a whole screenwriters playlist on there. So definitely get up there and get yourself some more, because I want to see your stuff at some point. Trust me. The world's a better place when Hollywood, or I guess filmmaking, is at its peak. But television's pretty amazing as well. And just remember, you make a hell of a lot more money with television than you'll ever make with film. And my teacher said, he said, I would write for television today if I was 28 years old, because the economy of how many hours you get to develop a character is off the chain. And if you think about it, there's 26 episodes to any one season of Star Trek. So you get all those amazing, rich characters that were designed initially, and you get 26 hours. That's 45 minutes, actually, a pop times 26, to tell stories about those characters. And then season 2, season 3, season 4, if you make a good run at it. And you get residual checks like crazy. It used to be the actors on TV were phenomenal back in the late 50s, early 60s. Then it kind of took I guess we had some pretty good ones in the 70s as well. In the 80s, it was kind of hit or miss. In the 90s, kind of wonky as hell, because everybody wanted to be on the silver screen. But now television and movies are interchangeable for quality, special effects. And so just make sure that you don't pit yourself in a way that you can't be transitional and dynamic. And who knows, maybe you'll write for both. When you got the skill, you got the skill. And if you're ever worried about artificial intelligence taking over everyone's jobs, just put this in your back pocket. AI, or screenwriting in general, story writing, human, condition analysis. This will be one of the last jobs they ever can take away. And they're saying that, AI is writing stories and stuff, but give me a break, Anyway, if you haven't been, go to deepthoughtsradio.com for all the stuff. There's audio, video, social media, an all-new remastered season 1, a store, and a place to donate. If this is the only episode you've ever seen of this show, just understand the other stuff is way, way different. So if you're just interested in learning screenwriting, do yourself a favor. Just stay in that playlist and you won't even know the other world exists. But it's a variety show of all kinds of mental things. I will say, as a writer, I'm hoping that a lot of the super deep subjects that we talk about, especially self-improvement and social episodes, whether you agree with me or not, is fodder for your brain when you are trying to come up with ideas. If you're a science fiction writer, definitely go into my Alien playlist, because I guarantee you there's all kinds of script mechanisms in there. There's all kinds of tension models in there and stuff that you can use in your script. I put together a lot of hypotheticals. There'll be an episode coming up here called the Alien Debut. If you're going to write a movie about aliens landing on planet Earth and it being a really crazy show, then that would be a good place to just harvest. Even if I'm just triggering other ideas that you have that aren't in my idea, it'll be valuable for you. So anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.